The Liberation of Sundrian City by Andrew Lewis. Chapter 9. A Fall Through the Ground. To say that Linus had a rude awakening would be a vast understatement. It was scarcely the brink of dawn when he was viciously yanked from his sleep by the scruff of his neck. He gasped in pain, and as fast as he had been pulled to his feet, he had stumbled and fallen hard backwards onto his buttocks with a thud that rippled up his spine. An instant later, the tip of a sword hovered inches from his face, held by a guard whose face was contorted with rage. "Who are you?" he demanded. Linus was in no state to talk. He was so terrified that it felt as if he were choking on his voice. The guard's sword slid further until it was touching Linus's throat. "Speak!" screamed the guard, his voice livid. But when Linus made his best effort at producing words, his mouth merely expelled a noise which sounded like va 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 va. The guard withdrew his sword, turned it edgeways, and slapped Linus hard across the face with it. As the sword had swung at his face, Linus was certain it was about to be lodged deep into his head, and he let out a piercing scream, a noise he wasn't even aware he was capable of making. "I'm Linus," he burst. "Linus Smith. I'm not meant to be here. I don't know how I got here." He was talking at 1,000,000 miles an hour, babbling. "Get up," said the guard. "Come with me." And with that, the guard grabbed Linus by the shirt and forced him to walk. Linus noticed that his short sword was now in the guard's possession, tucked securely into his belt. The elephant, who was lazily peering up and watching the commotion, had barely flinched, remaining indifferent throughout the ordeal, and as the guard frog-marched Linus into the palace, it shut its eyes once more and fell back into sleep. After a few minutes of being shoved down long, winding corridors, Linus mustered up the nerve to speak. "Where are we going? What will happen to me?" he asked, his voice quivering. "I'm taking you to see Commander Deimos. He will want to know about this." Linus had been afraid of this. In his mind, he had been reasoning with himself, trying to convince himself that surely a minor offence like this was not something the commander would need to know about. "Commander Deimos," he repeated. "Just for this?" "Just," repeated the guard incredulously. "Just for this, you say? Trespassing in the palace is considered equal to treason against the city of Sundrian." Linus remembered the time when he was 5 years old, when his father had caught him trying to climb the palace wall. He had received a hiding with such severity that he couldn't sit down for a week. "Let me tell you, son," added the guard in a severe undertone. "The best you can hope for right now is that you are granted trial." Linus said nothing more. In an attempt to buy himself some more time, he tried to slow his walking down as much as was possible with a guard pushing at his back. He tried to focus his mind on the task at hand, talking to the commander of the army of Sundrian City, the scariest man Linus had ever known, without fainting or indeed vomiting. A man who, even whilst talking to a boy who had just lost his parents hours earlier, had still come across as terrifying and harsh. They rounded one last corner and came to a large double door. Before entering, the guard smoothed out his uniform, cleared his throat, and as he placed his hand on the door handle, looking at Linus with a satisfied expression, he said quietly, "You're a dead man, my little friend." It was clear to Linus that this was a man who didn't often get the chance to play the hero and impress his commander. The doors swung open, presenting a large dining hall swarming with what appeared to be off-duty guards, their armour vests unbuckled or removed completely, swords lying idle on the tables, and raucous chatter buzzing about the room. The smell of breakfast was thick in the air. With a puffed-up chest, the guard led him across the hall to a seat where Linus recognised the back of Commander Deimos, who sat quite alone, sipping at a small steaming cup. "Commander Deimos, sir," said the guard confidently. Deimos barely turned his head. "This man was found sleeping in the palace gardens, sir. Trespassing, sir." Deimos turned, and as his eyes met Linus's, they expanded in recognition. "Man? This man, you say?" quizzed Deimos. "This here is a boy, Crusini. A boy by the name of Linus Smith, I believe. Rightful heir of the Smith family arrow factory." "My apologies, Commander Deimos. Of course, this is a boy," replied Crusini with a bow of his head. He looked a little surprised that the commander had recognised the boy. "Linus," said the commander, ignoring Crusini entirely, "you have trespassed into the palace, a crime punishable by trial of an elephant if you are lucky. Surely you haven't done this without good reason. Now tell me, what brings you to the palace today? Linus had no idea how to respond to this question. Should he just admit that he had gotten drunk and ended up there? No, that would not do. I needed to see you, he invented wildly. You needed to see me, repeated Deimos. Crissini gave a snort of laughter, and Deimos shot him a fierce gaze, a gaze that Linus recognised from just the previous morning. Yes, sir, I needed to see you. I have a question. A question? Well, go on then, you've come this far. What is it you want to ask me? Linus was thoroughly stumped. He tried to formulate a sentence in the form of a question, but his mouth and brain seemed to be malfunctioning. I had to, he stuttered, how to deliver the arrows to you, he managed. How to deliver the arrows? Why, we would come and collect them as per usual, Linus, replied the commander, rather casually. Was that all? Linus felt a swarming relief in his chest, which spread around his body. Could that really have worked? Was it that simple? Yes, that was all I needed to know, thank you, concluded Linus, his voice now steady and almost casual. You are sure? Asked the commander, with an expectant look about him. Linus was certain that the commander was thinking of something specific that he should inquire about, but for the life of him he couldn't think of a single question to ask. He nodded, slowly and thoughtfully. Happy to help, said the commander, and to Linus's utter astonishment, the commander did something he'd never seen him do before. He smiled. Linus smiled back. Well, I should go now, shouldn't I? Asked Linus, unsure exactly what should happen next. Yes, I think so, said the commander. Crissini? Crissini seemed to be in shock. Yes, sir. Take Linus here to the dungeons to await his trial, he said, still smiling. As the words were said, Linus felt his world crumble around him. It was as if all the wind had just been sucked out of him. His throat clenched up, and the blood drained from his head. His legs began to tremble violently, as if they could no longer support his weight, and the hall in which he stood began to shrink all around and squeeze the life out of him. Images of past trials flashed through his mind, limbs being tossed through the air, screams echoing. Trial, he muttered. Meanwhile, the commander had turned his back on them again and resumed sipping at his cup, and Crissini grinned an evil grin.